Welcome, my friends, to Paranormal Heart Podcast. Tonight's segment is pre-recorded, streaming on United Public Radio Network, 107.7 New Orleans. I'm your host, Kat Ward. Thanks so much for tuning in. My special guest tonight has been on the show multiple times. He's very knowledgeable in anything cryptid and folklore. Mr. Ronald Cryptoguru Murphy. On tonight's segment, Ron will be discussing a cryptid I haven't covered on the show yet, Thunderbirds. He's also helping me to celebrate the show's 7th year anniversary. So thank you so much, Ron. Welcome back to the show.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Not only has your longevity proven how good of a host you are in the form of paranormal podcasting, but also I'm also honored to be here because we're talking about something that's never been covered on your show before, and that is the infamous Thunderbird.
Yes, I think it's been mentioned just in passing, but I've never actually had an episode, so I'm really excited about this. I really don't know much about it.
Well, I think we're going to have a pretty fun time as we investigate it, not only the history, but also the present accounts of eyewitness sightings, because people are still seeing these things.
Yes. So before we get into this, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, first of all, I don't want to think that I'm trying to be so cool with these sunglasses. I was heading to a ghost tour in my hometown of Blairsville on Saturday, and had a run-in with several deer. Unfortunately, so I was not able to make my ghost tour. But I did get a bit of a black eye that's actually clearing up right now. It was almost swollen shut on Sunday. So there's been a lot of improvements being made. So I thought we would save everybody the ghastly look and wear my glasses. But I've been working a lot. I've been doing a lot. I finished a show, actually a film with Small Town Monsters that will air tomorrow on YouTube called Phantom Lights, and that is a movie that's going to go along with my book called Lights in the Mist, which will also premiere or be available tomorrow as well too. It's already available for pre-sale right now. So a lot of fun things are going on, and what is more fun than being on this show right before Halloween? So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think we've made it a bit of a ritual, because if I'm not mistaken, I did your Halloween show last year as well.
Yes, you did. Yep. So this is pre-recorded, so it's recorded just before Halloween, but it will air at the end of November when the actual 7-year anniversary of the show is. But yeah, I had to have you back on for such a special occasion for me. Thank you.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. Like I said, looking forward to it, and whatever direction you want to go, my dear, we can go that direction, because I know whenever we appear together, we always have a very conversational, good time. So I'm looking forward to whatever you want to ask away.
Well, I just want to start with, I don't even think I've ever asked you this before. How did you get into cryptozoology and folklore?
Well, actually, my mother had a lot to do with it. She was very much into the unexplained and the paranormal, and Bigfoot and things like that whenever I was growing up. So I just took after her. As a kid, we would watch programs together about Bigfoot, and we would read books about Bigfoot. So it was just the way that I was brought up. The world was a mystery. I looked at it with a very wide-eyed innocence, and in a way I still do that even to this day. And I just have always been brought up that there's more out there than meets the eye, and it makes life, a whole bunch more enjoyable, I think. So I still sleep with a nightlight on. I'm still afraid of things in the darkness. And as an investigator, I try to get as close as to what those things are that are making those bumps in the night. But sometimes the closer you get, the more frightening they become. But all this is a bit of a way for me to exercise those things which terrify me. And looking at it from that perspective, I like to look at the idea of a universal knowledge, a collective unconscious, if you will. And then all these creatures that we call monsters all fit into the paradigm of symbols, universal symbols. They become archetypes. So that as a researcher and investigator, that's what I look at. And it's just by extension that I got into folklore as well, too, because in order for these monsters to exist, they have to come from someplace. They just don't come out of a vacuum. And if we look at the folklore from various cultures around the world, we can find out that there's these archetypes of, the werewolf and the vampire and the wild man and all these other crazy things that should not exist, but they're definitely there. And one of the things that we'll talk about today will be the Thunderbird. Of course, this is almost uniquely North American, but there are instances around the world as well, places like India, that also have tales of very, very large birds within their mythology as well.
Well, that's interesting. Are they very similar to the ones in North America?
They're similar in as much as that they're huge birds, and I think that their behavior does mimic each other quite well. Now we have the case of the rook, which is this great bird said to be in the Indian subcontinent, but and for all intents and purposes, this is also a thunderbird from that culture. But what you have is a lot of these folk stories that are very that they're painted with a multi-layer of their mythologies, their cosmologies on top of them. So in order to get to that kernel of truth that lies underneath all this kind of stuff, you have to do a little bit of digging. But in my opinion, whenever we dig through that proverbial onion to try to get to that center and we pull off all these layers, what conclusion I come to is that all around the world, it seems that native populations had an interaction with a species of large bird that should have died out during the Pleistocene. So in my opinion, these Thunderbirds are at least remnant memories of humanity's interaction with a Territorn of some kind.
Interesting. So for the audience who aren't quite knowledgeable or who really haven't heard very much about Thunderbirds, such as myself is included, can you describe what they would look like, and do they have special abilities, or just tell us a little bit more about them?
Right, sure. So in the Native American culture, First Nations and Native American culture, especially the Plains Indians, they were seen as birds that brought in thunderstorms. With each flap of their wing, they brought winds and thunder, and lightning, was produced from their eyes and from their beak. But from a practical point of view, I do think that what's going on there is this bird had become the personification of the Thunderbird of the thunderstorms, because Thunderbirds are so named because they're so often associated with thunderstorms. And that makes sense because these were very large birds. I mean, some people reported wingspans of, anywhere up to, 30 feet. These were massive, massive birds. And in order to be that big and stay aloft, you would require to use thermal updrafts. And one of the best places to find those things is in very powerful thunderstorms. So if these birds were indeed flesh and blood, and there were cultures around the world that were witnessing these things, one of the best places to see these creatures would be during thunderstorms, simply because they could stay aloft with all the turbulent winds that were going on. So as far as their special powers, the bringers of storms, the bringers of rain, I would think that is the native folk ways of trying to explain away a bird of this size. Because like I said, we're talking about a very large bird. In some Native American accounts, they were known to attack buffalo, carry people away. But we do also know from a practical point of view that even immense eagles are unlikely to carry anything away of any particular size. Now, you can find videos out there of eagles picking up, small sheep and pretty quickly dropping them because even an eagle can only pick up a few pounds. I mean, these birds are massive birds, but they're not built to pick up very heavy objects. Even the California condor, which is,
I was just thinking of the condor, yeah.
Right. They can't pick up more than 11 or 14 pounds, so they're not going to be able to pick up a person. But it suggested that it's possible that the California condor, whenever their numbers were much more stable, may have been the impetus for the Thunderbird legend, because they would have been seen to, leave California and possibly go over the Great Plains, riding these thermal winds, and possibly even stopping at the Appalachian Plateau around where I live. So they may have been the cause for some of these legends. But I think that whenever we really get to the heart of the matter, that we're dealing with something that is not so much a misidentification of a presently known species of animal, but almost a Lazarus species, an animal that that used to exist, but is no longer surviving in the modern times. And one of the key culprits in this particular Thunderbird conundrum would be something called the Argentavis magnificens, which was a large bird that died out in the Pleistocene. Some people put it dying anywhere from 9 million years ago to well under 100, or well under a million years ago. So, maybe even 300,000 or 400,000 years ago. But still, they would not have been around for modern humans, anatomically modern humans, to witness them, because we've only been around in our present state for about 200,000 years. So unless, there was a remnant population of these creatures existing, I don't think that we would have had the Thunderbird legend. I think in order to have the legend and the mythos of the Thunderbird, we somewhere in our ancient past had to have an interaction with these type of creatures. And that's so impacted our collective unconscious that that's why we have them now as a part of our archetype around the world. Now, all that being said, we can talk about all that kind of stuff and how this all fits into mythology and these universal symbols and everything. That doesn't take away from the fact is that people are still claiming to see these creatures. In 1978, there was a young boy in Illinois who claimed that he was actually taken up off the ground by one of these Thunderbirds. Not very far off the ground, again, like I said, but he probably weighed somewhere around 50 or 60 pounds, so really too heavy for a bird to fly off with. But he claims that the bird had grabbed onto his shoulders and did lift him up off the ground, but he was able to struggle free. And I've got a chance to meet this gentleman. I got a chance to talk with him, and he does have the scars on his shoulders where something did grasp onto him. Which is, kind of scary whenever you think about it. Absolutely. But he went on to say that after he was dropped off, these birds flew a bit farther away, and one of them did. There was actually two of these birds, and one of them did actually fly a little bit farther away and carry off a pig from its stall at a neighboring farm. So that was his story. And again, we're going back to 1978 here. But again, people are still in Pennsylvania. They're still seeing these feathered creatures. And interestingly enough, in Texas, these creatures are also being seen, but they appear much more reptilian, almost like an extinct, reptile, like a pterosaur of some kind. People sometimes even describing them of having a protrusion on the back of their heads, much like pterosaurs would have, and big leathery wings, and also this very long tail that has a diamond shape at the end of it. Now, if you look at the archaeological record, that would be describing something called a rhamphorhynchus, which wasn't a very large flying reptile, maybe a wingspan of a couple feet, if that. So we're not talking about a very, very large animal, but people are reporting, like I said, places like Texas, places like Oklahoma, Arizona, in that deep kind of southwest area, these flying reptiles that they call the Thunderbirds, yet they seem to be more related to, like I said, a flying reptile instead of a feathered bird.
That's fascinating. I remember a few months ago, a friend of mine from British Columbia, who's a paranormal investigator, Andrea, she messaged me and said, "Hey, I've been hearing a lot about something that looks like a pterodactyl or a pterosaur that was sighted in Ontario and looks like it's heading towards the East Coast. So Ontario, Quebec, I couldn't find anything about it. So I'm like, where did you hear about this? I can't remember where she said she heard about it, but had you ever heard of anything like that up here?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So people, I mean, every now and then you get one of those sightings that kind of takes off, and because these are flying creatures, they can pick up and go, and multiple people can see them. They can, be in different places very, very quickly. And I think that we've all heard of like the Mothman or the flying humanoid, the owl man. We have all these different types of cryptids within our lexicon that tries to explain something that is a large winged flying creature. But I think that when we get right to the kernel of the truth is that we're dealing with much of the same kind of thing. It's an unidentified flying object, but it seems to be biological. So yeah, even whenever it comes to like I said with the Mothman, there were sightings of Mothman, very recently in Chicago. But as you investigate these stories much more closely, these reports are coming from areas that have a large protective area. That is a great migratory area for birds. And we talked about these birds that are seen in Texas that appear very reptilian. I think one of the standouts for what these might be would be, the heron or the crane, which does appear to be a reptilian-like animal. Their heads are very serpentine. They have very long, scaly legs. And whenever they fly, they hold their legs behind them. And for all the world, it looks like, a very long tail with this diamond-shaped protuberance on the end of them. And that's actually simply their feet. So I think there is a lot of misidentification there. But again, at the end of the day, people are still reporting, seeing these things, and there is no misidentification going on. It's hard to misidentify. I mean, it's easy to misidentify something that's flying, but people have also seen these things, on the road right before they lift off, and in fields and trees and such. And that's a little bit more difficult to write off. But size of any kind is always very difficult to calculate, especially at a spur of the moment. I remember one time I was driving around the corner, and there was a turkey vulture, which is very, very common here in Western Pennsylvania. There was a turkey vulture on the road. It was a back road, and it was, eating carrion. I think it was a deer kill, and it had its wings spread out. And to me, whenever I saw it, it appeared as if its wingtips touched both sides of the road. It looked like that big to me. And I went back out and I measured, and I found out that from one side of the road to the other was 11 feet. And I knew that there's no way that that bird had an 11-foot wingspan. So I started to do a little bit more investigation, and I found out, there's bushes at the side of the road. There's trees that are overhanging the side of the road. So in my mind, whenever it put out its wings, it appeared as if it did take up the whole entirety of the road. But in actuality, it was a bit of an illusion. But again, a misidentification of something that is very, very common, and which I've seen many, many times.
Yeah, we have turkey vultures here as well in the Ottawa Valley.
Oh, right. They can be very big creatures, can't they?
Yep.
Yeah, and I've seen we have turkey vultures here, and we also have black vultures here in Pennsylvania as well too. And I've seen both kinds, and they very rarely make any kind of noise. Sometimes people do report these Thunderbirds do make noises, especially when we talk about these reptilian Thunderbirds that are being seen in the Texas area. And I always point out that the great blue heron. They make a very strange, almost semi amphibian, semi reptile type of sound. It's almost a squawk, like that, instead of some sort of beautiful music that a bird would naturally make. So even their calls are very, very different.
Wow. Do you forgive me if you mentioned it already? I'm just fascinated about this, but do you know when was the first time they really started talking about Thunderbirds?
Yeah, well, so Thunderbirds, you can go back probably 2,000 years within Native American cultures and find them
That's right.
etched in petroglyphs. You can see them as part of totem poles out in the Pacific Northwest area.
Hmm.
So I would say that if these things start appearing in rock art going back 2 or 3 thousand years, there's probably an oral tradition that goes back at
Yep.
least another 1,000 years. So I would say in North
Yep.
America, there's been some notion of these things probably for at least the last 3,000 years.
That's just fascinating. So, is there a specific physical description or color of the feathers or anything like that? Like, what would they resemble comparing it with other birds?
Right, so they're usually very dark. I think that they come closely to resembling what people would think of with the Andorian condor or the Californian condor. They're usually very very dark. Some people have reported seeing a white frill around their neck, and of course, one of the universal hallmarks of these creatures is a very large fanning tail. That's what most everybody describes. People who have seen them whenever they, write down or try to attempt to draw a representation of what they saw. Almost inevitably, they draw this fanning tail.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, and again, when we look at the fossil record, our buddy the Argentavis, which is known, like I said, from the fossil record, was also believed to have a very fanning tail as well. And, that was just for the dynamics in order for it to stay aloft. So I think these kind of things, people that are witnessing these creatures are not ornithologists. They're just everyday people, yet they're describing things again and again that has to be biologically there in order for these creatures to stay airborne.
Hmm. And I find the past couple of years, what a lot of creatures, what that was, we thought that they were extinct, are starting to make a comeback globally. So maybe if this is something that old, maybe it really hasn't disappeared at all, and it's just still around.
Yeah, so that's my hope. Whenever I investigate anything like this, like one of my dreams is that we would still be able to find a woolly mammoth alive sometime. And people do claim from time to time that up in Siberia and up in the Yukon, people come across tracks or even seen these things moving around. And the woolly mammoth hasn't been extinct for that long.
Yeah.
There's probably some that was running around maybe 3,000 years ago. So they're not that ancient of a creature
Hmm.
in regards to whenever they were supposedly became extinct. So if there would be a remnant population, it would be shocking, but in no way should it be ever deemed impossible because there are places in this world to hide. Now, whenever we talk about a large bird, I think it becomes a lot more difficult to hide something that has to be airborne. But again, not completely possible. One of the ways these creatures could stay hidden is at the sheer height in which they could fly. These creatures might get up anywhere above 20,000 feet, 20 to 40,000 feet. So, I mean, they could actually be aloft at the same altitude of jet planes. So
Yep.
that's really one of the reasons why we might not be able to see them. And if they do stay aloft, and we do know that there's birds out there that stay aloft for almost the entire duration of their lives. So this is a very big bird that stays airborne for 9 or 10 months out of the year. Well, it would be almost impossible for us to see these things or encounter these things. And whenever they come down, maybe they come down in the deep hardwoods, someplace up in northern Canada or in mountainous regions, places where people don't necessarily go to. Because we also have to keep in mind too, if these creatures are still alive and somehow evaded extinction, they have to be elusive. And being elusive implies that would have to have great instincts. There would also have to be a bit of intelligence there as well too. But they also have to be extremely good at hiding, right? So think about Bigfoot, think about anything out there. It has to be good at hiding. And I think that a bird could very well stay hidden, especially if they fly mostly at night or fly all the time. They would have to come down. to eat and make little babies. But they wouldn't even have to come down and make little babies. They would have to come down to lay the eggs. But everything else can be done pretty much in the air. So that's one thing to consider. The only other drawback that I really see is that we've never encountered any kind of feather or anything, which would be awesome to be able to uncover something like that. But again, it's very possible with the areas in which these things do decide to land in or to nest in, that it's so far out of the way of human contact that we just simply don't stumble across these things.
We have to think too, for example, my husband and I went camping at this really isolated location a couple of years ago. Beautiful, beautiful campsite, no power or anything like that. And we did come across a large feather, but we would see all kinds of birds. But how often do you actually find a feather?
Right, exactly. That is very true. So I do a lot of stuff with my kids as well too. We go around lakes. And it's easy to find feathers of things like Canadian geese because there's so many numbers. And every now and then we'll find like the stray feather of a swan or something. But I've never came across the feather of a loon or anything like that. Every time I've been to the beach, I probably only found one or two seagull feathers. So yeah, absolutely, a bird doesn't necessarily have to lose its feathers in order to be a bird. I'm just talking about, as far as evidence goes, everybody demands evidence. I mean, I demand evidence because, extraordinary claims like this does require extraordinary proof. So, we're still looking, we're still investigating. But it's as an investigator, I look to see if there were any other previous reports of these creatures in the historical record. And indeed, we do find reports in Native American folklore, which is extremely important. We do see sightings around the world as well, too, of very, very large birds. They also do fit very nicely within the fossil record. And there are people who are claiming to see these things even now. So with all those kind of parameters met, as an investigator, you can go now push even further forward and think, well, now we can actually investigate because it does seem as if there is something out there that is not categorized by science.
Yep. And as far as its elusiveness, I'm kind of thinking of Jules Verne here, because recently they kind of mentioned about under the surface of our planet, there's oceans with more water than what we have on the surface. So how do we know there's not another world down there with dinosaurs, Thunderbirds, and there's various openings around the world and they just happen to come out?
Right. So as a kid that grew up with that kind of stuff, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells and all this great stuff, it would be awesome if that did happen. And of course, I have to be skeptical. I'm saying that I would love to see this, and who would not want to take an old-fashioned hot air balloon into one of these openings and go down there and find out what's down there? Yeah. But I think that's not beyond the realm of possibility. Mm-hmm. I know here in Western Pennsylvania, where I live, we have a lot of coal mines, and it's been said that you could go from miles and miles without ever having to come up above ground because the mine system is so elaborate and so complex and vast. And people think that might be the way that Bigfoot gets around. We don't see him because he's utilizing the mine systems. So is it possible that there are subterranean chambers and entryways here and there? I think that's extremely plausible. I know that in the Mammoth Cave system, it has a very elaborate chamber system that goes quite a distance. And in places like Greece, there's folklore stating that there are openings in the earth that actually go to other continents. So when we look at like the theories of Loch Ness, the idea that it opens up to the open ocean and there's an underground tunnel that leads there, these are all very fascinating things. But we have to ask ourselves, are they in the realm of science fiction? And I don't think that they are. I think that the world is a very complex creation, and there's a lot of things there that we simply don't know. And one of the plausible things to say, the reason why these animals can't be found is because they dwell, within this earth. That is something to say. Again, I will have to point out that I'm very skeptical about this, but if it would happen, I would like to be involved in that pursuit of what's down there.
Oh, that would be amazing.
It would. Yeah, wear a nice little safari outfit, all that good stuff, smoke a pipe and just, yeah, oh man, who wouldn't like, I would be like Challenger from the Lost World, and go in there and try to find some dinosaurs and take one back to London. Who wouldn't want to have that kind of time?
That's a dream.
It's absolutely.
So, wow, so much information. Like, I don't know how you can remember all this stuff. Like, I have a horrible memory, and there's all kinds of things that I have read and heard about, and then I don't remember them until people start talking about it. So I just kudos to you and all my other guests who have all this vast knowledge just ready to be spoken.
Well, I mean, it is a passion. I know it's a passion for you as well, too. But whenever you write about this stuff, a lot of it is just processed into the long-term memory. It's just because of usage is really the case. And, I also have always enjoyed the theater as well, too. So the idea of taking blocks of information and transferring them over to the long-term memory is something that I have always been able to do. And that's one of my talents. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, folks, not only is he brilliant with cryptozoology and folklore, he's also done a little bit of acting. He's a poet. He's written some amazing books as well. I've only had the pleasure of reading one of them so far. It was the one on the werewolves.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one because it was so different compared to other books that I've read on the topic. So it's just the way that you approach the writing was very interesting. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. Coming from you, that means a lot. So, so my writing style, in the world of the cryptozoological, whenever you pick up a book, it's usually nothing more than a litany of reports, right? 1978, this happened, and then this happened. And that's important because what it does is it provides a timeline for an investigator to say this was going on and what might have been the antecedent to why these kind of sightings were going on. That's all great, but that has never been my style. What my style is try to look as far back. It's almost like archaeology. Let's look back as far as we can in the historical record and try to glean what we can about this, the birth of the archetype. Where did it come from? Because it had to come from somewhere. And then once we can hold on to that very minutia of the formulation of this archetype, whatever creature we might be dealing with, then we can start progressing through time and see how it has evolved and changed with us. Because what I say in my book is that these creatures, Bigfoot, Thunderbird, all these creatures, they are embroidered into our DNA. They are really a part of us. We live behind walls and we live in electrical worlds, and we are only several hours away by jet plane to anywhere on Earth. Yet we still are afraid of things that are in the darkness, things on the periphery. We still are afraid of vampires and werewolves, and we're talking about Thunderbirds right now, and people still claim to see Bigfoot, and that is because it's so a part of us. And I think that they make us very human. They definitely put us in our place. They make us realize that there's more out there than just what we know is out there. And we as humans are full of hubris. We think that we have this unbridled knowledge of everything out there. We've even replaced God in a very, very true way by thinking that we know everything that is out there, and we kind of explain the deity away, and we just say this is the end all and be all, and it all comes down to mathematics. And then all of a sudden there's a discovery made that we cannot explain, or we cannot fit within that paradigm of science. And whenever that happens, it does show that we are not the end all and be all. We might be, the pinnacle of creation, but we are in no way on the same omniscient standing point of God. So I think these creatures make us far less divine than we imagine ourselves to be.
Yeah, it's almost like these creatures, I don't, kind of like genetic memory. We're just instinctively leery and afraid of these beings, and it just comes from someplace so long ago.
Right. So, Kat, I think that you hit the proverbial nail on the head. So that's exactly what we're talking about. We are talking definitely about genetic memories, these folk memories. We are talking about that part of our brain that is almost atrophied away, right? It sits in there, hardly ever used. It goes back to the time whenever we were at the bottom of the food chain and we were huddled together in the savannas of Africa, and the slightest little noise put us into a flight or fight mode. Nowadays we really don't need that anymore because, like I said, we have domesticated all the wild that is around us. But every now and then we will be someplace, in the woods or in the darkness, and something happens, and that part of our brain that has fallen fast asleep for the last few hundred years suddenly springs awake, and then it reminds us that there are things out there that we don't know about and is capable of doing us harm. And that is really kind of exciting. From a researcher's point of view, that's an exciting thing to think about, that we still have that folk memory out there, and we all share, across all time and space. So when we talk about, like, again, about things like Bigfoot, we have the Almasty in Russia, and the Yeren in China, and we have the Yowie in Australia. All around the world are these archetypal characters that mean something, and they're virtually the same type of creature. And how is that possible to evolve like that in so many different cultures and so many different languages? And the only conclusion that I come up with is that we interacted with these creatures somewhere in our distant past.
Yeah, because way back then we weren't able to communicate around the world like we can now, and within minutes. So when you have all these, like Bigfoot, like you just mentioned, for example, there's so many of them all over the world. Every culture seems to have them. They might be a little bit different in the way they're shaped or the coloration because of the different conditions, like the climate where they're from, but they're still pretty much the same creature. How can that be that everyone has that? So, yeah,
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely. So I wrote a book called On Wild Man, Tracking Bigfoot Through History, because before we had the language, we still had the creatures. So what they were invariably called by usually white settlers is the wild man, or the Rhine Pendek, which we have as well too. And that comes out like the orangutan, which basically means wild person of the woods. So even in a lot of native traditions, a lot of native tongues, the name still comes out to be a wild man or the wild person of the woods. So it reverberates throughout our human lineage that we know that there's something out there that appears to be very much like us, but it's still the other.
Yeah, and I've said countless times, that's what fascinates me the most about paranormal, is just the similarities throughout time with every religion, every culture. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I brought up this point before as well too, especially whenever we
Yep.
talk about cryptids.
Hmm.
Cryptids are only called paranormal because they've not been, pinned down on an examining table.
Hmm.
And once that happens, they will then leave the world of the paranormal and become the zoological.
Yep.
And that's a very sad thing if you think about it, because there's a lot of people out there that listen to these shows, of course not your show, but they see talks about people doing talks like this and everything, and say, well, these guys are crazy. They're chasing fairy tales, or they're using sloppy science or whatever. until something is discovered. And then all of a sudden we are, we are applauded for the research in which we have done. And I think that that is going to happen on a lot of things. But again, as I said before, the problem that happens is if we do uncover the Thunderbird or the Bigfoot or any other litany of these so-called cryptids, then we are automatically opening them up to the world. They're no longer our little passions that we fawn over and we investigate. Once they are proven to be flesh and blood, then it's a whole new ballgame. These things will then be seen, and these things will then be killed, and our monsters then will then be domesticated and used, and like everything else that people do. So, as much as I want to see Bigfoot proven and the Thunderbird proven and the Loch Ness Monster proven, I'm still okay with them still being a mystery for a while, because we need mysteries, and I would much rather see a Bigfoot glimpsed in the wild than behind some sort of bars, or even worse, taxidermied somewhere.
Or can you imagine domesticated Bigfoot and you have them in the backyard like your pet dog?
Oh my goodness, yeah. And you know what? That would be bound to happen as well too. 50 years from now, there will be an internet site selling your own baby Bigfoots or whatever. Yeah, people like to do that kind of stuff. People are, as much as and look, I love humanity. I have great faith in the human race, but we can do pretty screwed up things as well too. And we don't like conservation too much. Now, as somebody that has kids, one of the things that I stress, not only to my children but also to other investigators, that we need these creatures out there, and in order to keep them out there, we have to be good conservationists. And not only that, but we also have to be stewards for the environment as well too. Because for these things to exist, they need the wild spaces and the wild places. And I do not want to see the last of the wild places and the wild spaces disappear in my lifetime. That would be a horrible travesty.
Yes, it definitely would. Just getting back to the Thunderbirds, do you know how many sightings there are roughly every year?
In my neck of the woods, there's probably at least one or two a month. I mean, that's a lot if you think about it.
Wow,
36 a year around the Chestnut Ridge in western Pennsylvania, that's a lot. But that's one of the prime locations. I think whenever you go to places like Texas, you probably would have about one a month is there as well, too. Now that people are talking about Thunderbirds, and I just did a program for the Discovery Channel called Monster Files, and the one that I appeared on was about the Thunderbirds here in western Pennsylvania. But once we start talking about it, more and more people are going to see them, because now it's a part of their consciousness. So if they see something that they can't explain away, or some sort of abnormally large bird, they're going to naturally call it a Thunderbird, because that's the going lexicon of the moment right now. So just because they call it a Thunderbird doesn't necessarily mean that they're seeing one. But I think that is what happens too, because with the proliferation of these programs out there, these programs that are tracking cryptids or looking for ghosts or really anything paranormal, that people who follow these shows are more apt to see something which they term paranormal, simply because that was the way it was presented to them initially.
Kind of similar to when you purchase yourself a new car and it happens to be white, you notice all these white cars all of a sudden.
That's exactly right. Yeah, because the human mind is a very, very strange thing. We see things, we see the world, and we think that it's almost like a continuous type of feedback. But throughout everyday life, there's always going to be these little unexplained things that happened, and we have to fill in those spots with perceptions. What we perceive it to be. And sometimes those perceptions can be really, really far off. So I think that's the beauty of the human mind as well too. And I've said this before. I think taking a hike to the gray matter of the mind is just as exciting as taking a walk through the wildernesses around us, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in there as well too. And there might even be an interconnectivity between that world in our mind and that world beyond us as well too. But that's for a different show altogether. But no, I think that we as human beings, once we know about something, we are more apt to call it or see those things simply because it's it's part of the lexicon.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that now that people are talking more about Thunderbirds, that people might be misidentifying creatures and calling them Thunderbirds?
Yeah, I think that. Well, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. I think for a researcher, we have to go to interview a lot of people that have seen eagles or turkey vultures or osprey or anything like that. But also, it's getting it out there. People are seeing things now where they didn't see them before. And with that kind of knowledge, also becomes the idea of perception as well too. Once you have knowledge of something, then you can start seeing it. So I think that even though there's a lot of red herrings out there whenever we do an investigation, and people are seeing things that are misidentified, there's still that possibility that a few of these reports are talking about a creature that is uncategorized or uncataloged by science.
So we have a few more minutes here still. We're still doing good, but I still can't believe that so much time has passed already. It's just, you're so fascinating, and I love listening to you. But
well, it's your show. Every time I come on here, I'm surprised at how quickly we do go through an hour. And again, like I said to you before, 7 years is a long time, and your numbers just keep getting bigger and bigger. And I'm flattered to be here. And one of the reasons why this show goes so well is you're a very smooth and a very generous host. So it's actually, for a guest, it's a pleasure to be on a show like this with you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. So can you tell us a little bit about that TV show that you did about the Thunderbird?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So again, it was on the Discovery Network. So I don't know. I suppose that you get it up in Canada. I know that you can get it here in the United States. Yeah. So it was about researchers that were taking eyewitness accounts and trying to find out if they could actually capture a video of the Thunderbird. Now, I won't give anything away, but did they capture a Thunderbird? And the answer is no. But I pointed them in the direction of radar. Because whenever I was doing my research on my book, The Unexplained World of the Chestnut Ridge, which has a chapter in there about Thunderbirds, is that I was wondering why they were not picked up on radar. So I visited a local airport, and I found out that there are a lot of things out there on radar that are simply not identified. It was amazing, because I went there in summertime, in the middle of the day, in broad daylight, and I was looking at the monitor. And there were things out there that were flying around that were being picked up on radar, but there was no ID tag. Those could have been military planes. They could have been police. It was something official, but there was also things out there that simply did not have any ID either. And I was thinking, well, what is the possibility that those might be the Thunderbirds, right? Now, I think that is a very, a plausible situation that these things are picked up and they're just not being paid attention to because they happen to be a biological entity that's really doing no kind of danger to anything that's going on, especially considering the height that they fly, whether very high or very low. But I think that people are seeing these things and picking them up on radar, except people are not talking about them or reporting them for whatever reason. I'm not very big into conspiracy, but it's very possible that the governments know about these things as well too. And the reason why they're not picked up on radar, or why they're picked up on radar and nobody does anything about them, is because they're assigned a certain type of clearance code. So, people know that they're out there, people can track them, but the everyday person doesn't realize that.
Oh, never thought of that. Yeah. Do you know if there's any pilots, either military or commercial, or any pilot at all? Have they ever seen any in flight?
No, you know what? Not that I have heard. But again, we're talking about a plane that is going 500 miles an hour as
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
too. So, that would be very difficult. But I will tell you, my cousin John Kovac, he lives out in California, and he launches these great balloons, like these huge balloons that actually go up into the outer atmosphere of the Earth. And he actually appeared on local television out in, I believe it was in San Jose. But he launched a balloon that went up through the troposphere. So they were in an area right then that had no wind or anything like that, and something bumped his camera. Now that was a little bit frightening. So was it a Thunderbird? I have no idea. But something was up there in that particular airspace with his balloon that was bumped, and there shouldn't have been anything up that high.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously nothing actually showed up on the camera.
No, nothing showed up on the
Yeah.
camera. And with that thing, though, I mean, it could have been the flap of a wing, even, up at that height.
Wow. How long ago did that happen?
That was about 2 years ago, fairly
Okay.
recently.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, fairly.
Has he released any more balloons since?
No, he's done a lot of rockets and things like that. It's really interesting. Ever since we were kids, he was always doing this kind of stuff. We lived one house apart until he went off to college and moved to California. But yeah, he was always. We were always launching balloons or launching rockets and everything, and he just took it into adulthood. And now he does it on a much greater scale.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
It is. It really is.
Wow.
Yeah, and I like the idea, especially of drone technology. I like the idea of tracking things from above, and I think that if there are things out there to be found, one of the ways to do that is from a very clandestine, very silent way of doing it is by drones or balloons or doing it definitely from the air.
Mm-hmm. My husband and I, just the other night, we're watching YouTube. The other night, we're just watching drone footage, and we happened to stumble upon one where they claim that they spotted a Bigfoot. It did kind of look like there was something in the forest, but someplace that humans can't get to easily, and you just fly a drone in, and then you spot something like that. So we might be able to start discovering things with this drone technology.
Well, especially the prices are coming down. And once the prices are coming down, that means our everyday consumer can get a pretty nice quality one out there. And if you have enough of these things out there flying around, something is going to be getting caught. However, I believe if things start getting caught on drone footage, what will happen then is the government will step down and say they're a hazard to fly, and then people won't be flying them anymore.
Yep. Or they'll have something in a zone where drones, I don't want to say like a pulse to stop them from flying, but they might implement something to stop drones from flying there, or just put a no-fly zone even for drones.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought about these kind of things as well, too. So.
Yep. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, Ron, we have a few more minutes. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't. I thought this was a great show. I will tell you though, whenever this finally airs, you'll be able to watch Phantom Lights, the movie, on YouTube for absolutely free. It's through Small Town Monsters, and you can order my book, Lights in the Mist, from Small Town Monsters Press as well, and they'll be both out by the time this airs. And I'm wishing you a very happy Halloween, but I guess whenever this comes out, we'll be wishing each other a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving for you guys. In Canada, we already had it.
For us, that's right. And it's appropriate that we have a Thunderbird episode whenever we're going to be serving turkey.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And earlier today, we had a thunderstorm.
Oh, this is meant to happen. Then. This is meant to happen.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes out for any kind of lingering Thunderbirds out there. So.
I should have rushed outside to see if I saw any large birds with that thunderstorm.
Yeah, I would have. You should have done that. You should have been prepared for the night's interview.
I should have been. Yes, I failed.
That's okay. Next time.
Yes. Now that I know. So where can the audience find you?
You can go with Cryptoguru /Ron.com, which is my website. You can see me on Facebook, which is Ronald L. Murphy Jr. You can get in touch with me on my email is ronaldlmurphyjr@yahoo.com. That's my direct link to me. I would love to talk to whomever wants to talk about anything. And you can get my books on Amazon, or you can order some of my books even through Walmart or Small Town Monsters. So there you have it.
Excellent. I look forward to reading more of your books other than just the werewolf one. Like I said, I really like your writing style, and it was pretty fascinating. So thank
Well,
you
I
so much
appreciate that.
again for helping me celebrate my 7th year. I can't believe it already, 7 years. And I really appreciate, I always have a great time talking to you whenever you're on here.
My pleasure. And I cannot believe that it has been 7 years. But yes, I definitely applaud your longevity.
Thank you so much. So hang tight. I'll say my final goodbyes to the audience, and then we'll touch base after. So thanks
Sounds
again.
good.
Well, folks, that was another episode. Thank you to my very special guest tonight, Ron Murphy, the Cryptoguru. And I would like also to thank UPRN 107.7 New Orleans. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please like, share, subscribe. And if you want to be a guest on the show, just send me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. Even if you just want to say hello, like I said. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Much love. Until next episode, take care.